if you want to be able to see the documentary again, find a way to be able to see. She has a 50-minute version. Whether you can see it in a class or not, it's a whole different. That's another discussion point that you probably can't. But we're gonna turn it over to her. So if you could please welcome Heather Macadam.
So I'm gonna just do 3 quick slides for you guys, just in case you don't know. I love history teachers. One of my college history teachers just passed away last March, but I got to see him last year, and he was a big supporter of mine when I was writing my first book, which was Rena's Promise, which is used in North Carolina as part of their Holocaust curriculum, and it's more YA. It's a memoir. It's written first person, present tense, and it's about Rena, who was on the first transport you saw in the movie, and her sister Danka. And what I discovered in my history class, in my world history class, was the Holocaust has a big, long history. And for those of you who don't know, the Crusades, the Crusaders were financed by killing villages of Jews who were hosted first. So there's an extraordinary document. I just pulled it up on Wikipedia just so you could see it. But if you don't know this and you are looking for a long context before the Middle Ages, you can take it all the way back to 1000. Next slide. And then in Rena's Promise originally, click, there, I was gonna make every chapter one of the edicts against the Jews, because the last one is Auschwitz. Birkenau was a barn. It's where the Polish army kept their horses. So when I discovered that in my history class, and I was working with Rena in North Carolina, I was going to Salem College at Winston-Salem. This was like this light bulb moment of, Germany is largely Lutheran. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to convince the public that what they were doing was right, and they used Martin Luther as a way of doing that, right? So if you're looking for any context like that, so it makes a really interesting conversation. I know some of you have 1, 2, or 3 days, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that. I also understand, next slide, that Vlodka was one of the podcasts that you guys, I just endorsed the book. It's a great book, and it is about a teenager working in Warsaw Ghetto. She's Aryan looking. That one of the things that I was really astonished by in reading that book was the conflict she felt in her identity, passing as an Aryan and helping Jews that looked like Jews, and how in today, she was lucky, but thinking how many people, I don't know if you can even do this in Florida, but that you can sort of take it further down the line, because some people can't pass as white and are being targeted, and so it's an extraordinary story, and that part of it I found really topical, and I think it's come out. Yeah, I just endorsed it, so I don't know. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. So Rena, who you met, this is Rena's Promise. That's Rena and Danka 3 or 4 months after liberation. And that's how I got started. And I was actually undergraduate. I was at Salem College when I met Rena. She said she wanted to write her story. I interviewed her, I wrote the book, and it was sort of my senior thesis, and then it got published. And that's what brought me in to the first transport. When Rena told me she was on the first transport, I was shocked, because I didn't know about the first transport was young women. And I was like, why don't I know about this? And I was angry, right? I took it really personally. And I went to the Wake Forest archive, and sure enough, there's an incredible book. It's like that thick. If we were on Zoom, I'd show it to you. It's completely ripped up. It's the Auschwitz Chronicles, the day-to-day workings of the Auschwitz and Birkenau death camps from the day it was started in December 1939. And there it is listed in there about the 999 kapos, the 999 Jewish girls coming from Slovakia. But I started to look in other history books and I couldn't find it. And there was John Roth and Carol Rittner wrote a book called Different Voices about women in the Holocaust before this other one came out. That was in the 90s. And they mentioned the first transport. So, there was not a lot of information in the West. In the East, in Slovakia, I discovered in 2012, it was very well known. And that was really extraordinary. And I'm just going to pause here and say, if you have any questions, please interrupt and raise your hand, okay? Because this is your session. But I just wanted to give you a little background there on what brought me to this. So basically, I was living in Europe. I realized it was the 70th anniversary of the first transport, and that I was not rich and I could fly to Slovakia for $14 from where I lived in England. So I went, oh, why don't I go to Slovakia? And I said to my boyfriend, want to go to Auschwitz? And he went, sure. And we got a camera and we filmed the entire thing. And actually I had a vlog on YouTube. You can still find a lot of what we did. I'm going to show you some of those just so you can see some of the background. YouTube is called Rena's Promise. That's our YouTube channel, and you can go through a lot of that stuff if you do. I do get a lot of students looking for those things. So how many of you know what the word beshert is? And we can go to the next slide. 2, great. It's always funny to me how many people don't know Jewish terms who are teaching the Holocaust. Oh, this is, okay, we can play this, because I jumped ahead. I forgot I had this slide in there. Yeah, so this is originally, I slowed it down so you could actually see it, and then it didn't save. Oh well. But there is a plaque at the train station in Poprad. And I arrived in Poprad. That's a very tiny town in the High Tatras, and which you saw, of course. I just forgot you watched the film. And there's this plaque there, and there were candles on the anniversary. We can go to the next slide. And there was candles and rocks, like the Jews put rocks as memorials, right? And I discovered that Adela Gross, her nephew, had been to the plaque on the anniversary, and he was in Slovakia, and her sister Dutsi survived. And this is complete beshert, okay? Explain what beshert is. Meant to be. Meant to be. It's fate, right? So Rena wrote about Adela in her book. Adela had gorgeous, because you just watched the film. Anyway, so Rena wrote about Adela, right? The family never knew what happened to her until Rena's Promise came out. And I was in Slovakia, actually I was in Auschwitz, when they wrote to me. One of them had read the book and they were like, oh my God, Lou. It was actually Joan, Lou's wife, who just sent me an email today. And that was Lou when Adela was deported. He's gone now, but she said, your cousin is in this book. And I was on this trip in 2012 when I got an email saying, we are Adela Gross's family, the survivors of that family. And I'm sort of an honorary Gross at this point. It's really amazing, that because Rena saw Adela go to the gas, we shared that publicly. And that family ended up with some sort of closure about what happened. And that's what inspired me. I was like, how many other stories are out there? And as a big picture, how many stories can't we solve in the world today from violence, genocide, it's for me, it was just like, if I can do that one little thing, maybe it makes other things less, maybe it will build or whatever. Anyway, there's Lou. He was so sweet. And more Beshert, Edith Grossman, who you also met, marries Ladislav Grossman, whose brother marries Dutzi Gross. So I have photographs of the entire family, the Grossman and Gross family, together. And when I meet Edith, she knew Adela. She remembered, and Dutzi and Adela were best friends. Dutzi and Leah, Edith's sister, were best friends, and Adela was the younger sister. Next slide. This is just for everybody who teaches Holocaust, because I hear this all the time, and so did Edith. I know everything, and of course we don't. And there's nothing like hearing a Holocaust survivor remind us of that. And I am curious. I know this film feels very, very intense for people. And I'm curious, does anybody have a comment about, if it was intense for you, why you believe it was more intense for you than maybe another Holocaust film that you've connected to or watched? Yeah.
Speaking as a product of Orange County Public Schools, we didn't learn about the Holocaust a lot, and when we did, it really didn't show the extent of the atrocities committed against women and children. We always heard from it from a male perspective. And I'm not saying that it's okay when bad things happen to guys. That's not okay. But it hits different. I just had a baby, so I have a 2-year-old at home. So seeing the young girl in the gas chamber with the baby, and she's like, "It's okay, Rosa, I'll watch the baby." It hits different, It really did seem like nobody was immune.
Anybody else? Any comments? Yeah, I think that I agree. It's a little bit different. I think it may be one of the reasons why they've hidden the history so much. Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about at our table, if they mentioned it in the documentary, I will apologize. How many of the 999 survived?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know, and we can't know because of the way they dispersed. Some went to Sweden, I know a survivor in France, some went to Belgium, some went to Israel, some went back to Slovakia. When I got to Slovakia in 2012, and then I began to work with historians there, they thought 22 women had survived. But that's because those were the women who went to Slovakia. We had an Iron Curtain. So the information wasn't passed on, right? And I'm like, no, I got 26 in America. And then people started emailing me. I got 26, I got 50 in Israel. I've got 8 in Melbourne, Australia. They were all over the place. So we don't know. And my nearest guess is about 200, mostly because Drexler says, we're not going to put you, if you're dead, if you're sick, we're going to kill you. We're not going to stick you in the gas just whimsically like we did with Adela. So they had that slight protection, and most of them got better jobs, so that they had more of a chance to survive. But yeah, that's about the near as I can figure. I know of at least one survivor who died on the death march. I'm sure there were many others. And then I know of one in Bergen-Belsen who died the day of liberation because she ate too much. Yeah, it did. And I also know of a survivor who committed suicide in the 60s, who I use her photo in the film as to honor her. We can go to the next slide. I'm not sure what it is. Let's see. Oh, so this is, and you can click. Yeah. So this is Orna Tuckman. She's from Melbourne. This is her at Yad Vashem in Israel, and she's looking at her mother's name on the list. And this is the original list. I was just working with some researchers, archivists at the Holocaust Museum in DC. You can see these are, so this is Leah Friedman, there's Edith, right? And that's the birth dates. This is the road they lived on in Humana, Slovakia. And this is alphabetical by last name. And when they turned themselves in, they were checked off. And then if they weren't checked, the police went down to find them. So that's why we have different ways that they were collected. This is an original document. And this, actually, I was just in Israel this January, and I've done a lot of remote work because of COVID and stuff, but I finally got to spend about an hour with that document, and it's really crispy little paper, I got to smell it and see, and they were able to let Orna have access to it. Orna has a very interesting story. Orna, when we mentioned the women who are sterilized, I was in Auschwitz with Orna when she told us that she was adopted and her mother had been sterilized. And her mother died and never told Orna that she had been adopted. So Orna discovered that she is Romanian, of Jewish origin, and actually she has Romanian family that she's now connected to. We can go to the next slide. But there's so many of these complicated little stories, which of course I cover in the book and I can't cover in the film because we don't have that sort of time in the film.
It's Bekerova, one of the women that Bekerova came back. But I cannot remember Margita or somehow, because she was a year older than I am.
Uh-huh.
So if you have her there, she came back.
Okay, but not Rebecca.
Not Rebecca. Mansi Bekerova.
Okay.
She helped me to
Bekerova.
bring a pair of shoes that I can walk.
That's
Remember Rella? Which one of these?
And that's Edith.
Rela, Zaltzmanova Rela, yeah.
Yeah. Did she survive?
No.
Okay.
So we're going through the list.
Shumanova, Weissova.
Vaisova, yeah, I know where she was, where they were living, not right. The whole family, nobody came back. Not from Zaltzmanova, not from Vaisova, no one person came back.
It's extraordinary to stand there with Edith and go through a list of names. There's 200 people from Homina, girls, and she could tell me what happened to almost every single one of them. And what an amazing moment to hear her say, oh, nobody came back. That family, no, nobody came back. I was just like, stunned. I had no idea it doesn't go in the film because it's really, my camera is sideways. I didn't know what we were going into. But the resource that Edith was able to give me, and I'm able to construct stories that, so I use a lot of stories from the Holocaust, the Shoah Foundation, right? Which is a great resource, but the testimonies don't connect the dots. Edith did. So the story of Irina in Block 25, that's 4 or 5 testimonies come together. And the only reason, I hear, we have Bertha saying, I hope she survived. She remembers what they did, but she never meets Irina. She has no idea. And Irina grew up with Edith. And then I'm in Irina's testimony, and she says, my friend from Homina picked me up at the airport in Toronto when I left Israel. And I call Edith up, and I go, did you know Irina? Oh, yeah. Our husbands played soccer together. And I was like, she cut her toes off. And so like, these are the sort of conversations I have. All of this, it was literally like connecting dots and creating a tapestry that of story and narrative that was so powerful for me, because when they're all separated, right? But when you pull them together, it's a much more cohesive narrative, right? And that's, nobody's actually told a story of a transport, right? Imagine if you could tell, like Henry Louis Gates Jr. does all of this amazing work on the slave trade and using DNA evidence. And imagine all we have is the DNA evidence. Imagine if you could tell an entire nonfiction story, not imagined, but nonfiction. That's what I had, right? It was just amazing. Yeah.
Somebody in the chat, just in case somebody's not looking, just said that one of the storytellers with Teach the Shoah is the grandchild of one of the women from the transport. She also works at the Holocaust Museum in LA and presents in classrooms.
We can go to the next slide. Unavailable. Okay. Well, let's just go to the next slide. I don't know which one that was. Didn't link. All right. This is me going into block 10 in Auschwitz. So we can go ahead and show this. So you get to actually see what block 10 looks. It's not part of the, you're not allowed into it if you go to the I get special compensation to go almost anywhere. The first time I went to Auschwitz, the tour guys were following me. It was really funny. I felt very stiff. It took us about 10 minutes. Mr. Rocco. Yeah. It's like New York City. Yeah.
Sorry, I was inside the first, sorry.
So this was Rena's first block, block 10, and she was upstairs.
I've never walked into this place before
Should we
when I was
go up?
filming this. This was in 2000. Very dusty.
We got special permission to come in here today on the 70th anniversary of the first transported women to Auschwitz. Was this the Blackovas room? Mm-hmm. So Elsa was in there.
Elsa's the block elder. She was, that was the room that she would have stayed in.
Rena had a bunk against this wall, and she could peer out the window through the slats and see the
So Rena used to
See the
look
Russian
through those
POWs being
slats.
shot at
On the
night.
down below is block
Because of this
smear sheet
window
of
here, I
block of
can't
death. And she
look
watched Russian
in.
prisoners, POWs, being executed against the execution wall through those slats, which was a pretty intense experience for her. And I'm just going to speed this up because I don't. This is the rest of the
quicker roll call number now.
girls would often, there was a fence between the two camps. This is Auschwitz I, the very first camp.
Dorota.
And
Dorota.
they used to throw bread that the
Dorota.
men used to
Dorota.
notes through the window.
I'm working at our
over
researcher's
the
office.
fence
Still
for
with
the
documents,
girls.
still with
So
those
they had a block
testimonies
on
which
the
are
other side
written
of
by
the other
those
side
who
of the
survived
fence.
this camp, and also with those
This
survivors.
is all edited, and for some reason, none of it's coming back.
The far
So I'm
side,
just gonna
I think it must have been the second.
He said that these.
Great. And I think we just skip this one too, because they've seen the movie. Yeah. All right. I think we can skip that one too. Wait, I just went the wrong way. Sorry, guys. Okay. So quickly, we're going to jump forward to Canada. We didn't use this in the. I love this line, but we had to cut it. You know, one of the problems with making a film is it has to be short enough for people's butts not to get too stiff. Anyway, so this is Monsi Becker, who grew up with Edith and who saved her by smuggling shoes to her. And she's talking about how, you know, how they survived and through Canada. If you want to go ahead and press play there.
I think in every misery there is some kindness.
And I know the sound is bad
From every hell,
because of
somebody
Zoom.
came back.
At least we have
Somebody
that.
has to come back from here too.
Many Slovak girls worked in Canada and often smuggled out or organized items for their friends.
I was an artist. Once I smuggled through something, a bed jacket in my shoe. I nearly died. It was so tight.
This story in the morning when we
Okay,
went
you
to
can,
the
you can
barrack,
move to the next one because
we
you've seen
put
the film.
on
I love.
5
How do you stick
underwear. We came
a
to
bed
the
jacket
camp.
in your shoe?
I think in
Just
every misery there
extraordinary.
is some kindness.
And I love that line there.
From every hell,
next
somebody
slide.
came back. Somebody has to come back from here too.
There, 15. There we go. Okay, and you can click again because I'm going to show you who these women are. So these are archival photos from Canada. This is, oh, the names may come up. Yeah, so that's Linda Reich Brader right there. That's Helena Citronova, whose sister she pulled out of the gas chamber. This is Mira Gold, who I have a picture of with Margaret Friedman, and we can click again. There we go. There they are as old ladies. So that's Mira Gold, and I know her daughter very well. This is Linda, and this is Margaret Friedman and Margaret Kulik, and we got a great archive from the Kulik family. Margaret had, she always had this funny face. She's like, you know, she was always mugging for the camera. And she had a huge photo album of all of her friends. Margaret's the one who says, we were all in Auschwitz, you know, and she points out to everybody, and it's the wedding of the Lily Friedmanova. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, please. Canada, okay, so this is, thank you, very important. These, can we go back? Those photographs are posed, okay? So when they were in Canada, they were actually allowed to wear clothes. And when you got into the upper echelons, you didn't have to wear the striped uniforms anymore. They still had things on the back, but this is also a posed photograph. So this photograph, smiling, right? The SS, the Nazi photographer says to them, smile, this is for the Red Cross, right? Where are the lines? The Hungarian Jews are over here, going to the gas chamber. And Linda talks about that in her testimony. So it's one of the reasons I'm really, really careful with photographs I use. Almost all of your Auschwitz photographs, unless they were clandestine, were posed. So, you know, when you see the Russians coming in my film, it's one of the most, you know, there's some old ladies in a block. It's always, always, always used for Auschwitz and liberation. And they're sitting there and they're talking, they're Polish. They're not Jews, obviously. They're not in prison garb. That was posed by the SS. I mean, not the SS, I'm sorry, the Russians when they were in liberation. So I won't use that footage. And one of the other reasons I won't use it is because they're old. It doesn't speak to my people. My girls were really young, and there's no way there were a Jew would be in her 60s. Yeah, so this is posed, and all of the photographs from that period were from that photo shoot were posed for the Red Cross to show how wonderful it was. You were next, and then you, yeah.
You mentioned Helena with the singing voice.
Yeah.
I remember in the movie it said that there was an SS guard that fell in love with her.
Yeah, Wunsch.
Did that allow her to live, or did she perish as well?
No, she survived. Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, in the credits, when you in the credits where there's a little brief spot where Judy, there's a voiceover and there's a woman and somebody's saying thank you for your memories of my sister. That's actually Billy, who is Reginka, Helena's sister, next child. And Judy went to kindergarten with Aviva, and named her daughter Aviva in honor of Aviva. So Judy lives in Toronto. I interviewed her once again. I love the part. Maybe the most important to me line that Judy says to us is she talks about Homina after. Judy survives because her parents take her into the mountains. She remembers waking up in the snow coming down, and her parents holding their coats over her while she sleeps. She was like 6 or 7. And they took the train with Aviva's family. But Aviva's family went to Bratislava, which is close to Vienna, and they went into the mountains, and obviously Aviva didn't survive. So Judy talks about coming back to Homina and how everybody's just in shock. Nobody really knows what to do. And she remembers Reginka coming to her mother's house. And we think that she left with a photograph that we now have. And then Judy says, the teachers were all gone. She remembers that there were just no Jewish teachers left, which, as teachers, that's a pretty intense thing to hear. I really wanted to have it in the movie, but I don't. We just had to cut. They had made me cut things I didn't want to, yeah. But, oh, I know Susanna. Yeah, Landry. I know it, yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know Susanna very well. Yeah, great. Yeah.
I just thought everybody might be interested to know that some of the photographs, like you were mentioning, that were taken in Auschwitz on a day in 1944, came to light because of one of our local Holocaust survivors, Lily Jacob, who had those photos in her possession. She found them when she was liberated.
Wow.
Where they were in a drawer, and she took them with her, and she donated them eventually to Yad Vashem before this center was open yet. But she lived here at that time. If she hadn't done it then, they might have come out through this center. But she recognized a lot of the people in the photos because she was a later deportee,
right?
And actually recognized people from her own town.
Yeah.
In the photos, and they were in fact, well, they weren't all staged, but they were taken for propaganda purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I had a question earlier about, so we used 3 films for reenactment. One of the challenges I had as a filmmaker, because I'm really a writer, is I can describe anything in writing, but in film it's a visual medium. So we used 3 archival reenactments. The first one is a study atop, and that's like the film footage that you see where they're working. I mean, when I watched that film, I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about, because I kept reading about this huge roller, and we push it, and girls are, and I just like, I couldn't imagine what they were talking about. And then I see it, and I'm like, like that's really huge, right? And it was, so that footage was really, really helpful for me in showing you guys what it looked like, what women's work was. The throwing of the bricks, Rena talked about that. They threw the bricks till their hands bled, and then they would move them back to that other side. They would it was just work to kill you, right? Like, we don't know what to do with you today, so we're gonna do this. So a Stadia Top was actually filmed in Auschwitz, in the camp, not the museum, in the camp in 46. And that film comes out 46, 47, film comes out in 48. And it was a swamp. Birkenau was a swamp. Malaria was real. And when I was filming a couple years ago, we were doing all the drone work, and we were working with a guide, and we were up in dawn and, you know, and sunsets. It was pretty incredible. I commented to the security guy, you know, like, why isn't it a swamp anymore? And he said, oh, they diverted the aquifer. Well, there is a paper by a Holocaust denier who takes water samples in Auschwitz, and he states that the reason you know that Auschwitz is fake is because of the water quality, but he never tells you that the aquifer was diverted. That's why history and facts are so important, right? It's, you know, it is dry now. It is very dry. So we use a Stadia Top in the prisoners, a lot of them are actual former prisoners in Auschwitz wearing the prison garb, their actual garb. Obviously they're all Polish, the Jews are dead. But that is, you know, that footage is often used in documentaries because it is as close as we're ever going to get. Then we have a film that was out of Israel called Capo. I use that just because I wanted to show carrying a body, because that was a very traumatic thing for the girls to have to carry a friend. And then we also use a film that was Ladislav Grossman, Edith's husband's film. It's called The Bride. And I wanted to be able to show, you know, how they glued notices up, because it's so different, especially nowadays. You know, people don't understand. You didn't get a text like, oh, this is news. Yeah. So those are your three. Those are the three films that I use. Everything else is archival. And I have footage. I'm very proud to say that Michael Berenbaum called me up and said, where did you find that? It's right after the crematorium. And that is actual footage. It must be clandestine. I don't know. It was found in Russian archive. And it is an actual SS running down the path. And those are actual prisoners in Birkenau clearing away the ruins of the crematorium. And it is literally like 2 seconds. If you blink, you miss it. And we slowed it way, way down so you could see it. Yeah, and I'm a hound dog when it comes to finding things. So I spend a lot of time looking through archive. We can go to the next picture. And you can click on this. You can click on this again because I'm showing you once again people that are in these photographs. So yeah, so there's Marta Merrick, and then these are her cousins up here. These two are her cousins. That's Etta and Fanny Zimmer-Spitz. And that's Bertha. Bertha was really photogenic, so they posed her in a lot of things. That photograph up there in the Holocaust Museum, it says that she had typhus. And I was like, she didn't have typhus. But they have somebody with their elbow up showing how skinny they were. Okay, we can go to the next. That is Ida Eigerman, and we found that in displaced persons. That's at the displaced persons camp, and one of her daughters found it in one of the archives and went, "That's my mother. She was always knitting." And we went back to exactly. That's that's sort of. Oh, there you go. Now you can see Marta and Etta and Fanny. We can go to the next one. There's Bertha in the matzo ball picture. And of that photograph, the only two people to survive are Bertha. This is Pesci Steiner. Pesci, you'll read about in the book. Pesci was Bertha's best friend. She saves her life, and then she dies of typhus later. And Herschel survives because his parents send him to Brazil. And the family doesn't survive, but Herschel does. Next. Yeah, and this is Dutzi. This is Deborah Adela Gross's sister. She's the only one to survive from this photograph. This is Anna Hertzkovikova, so they're much younger here. That's Leah. We don't know who this is. This girl, I don't know who she is, but I find her in one or two other photographs. There's some seamstresses, and she appears in one of the, she looks almost like her as a little older, and I don't know who she is, and I have no idea if she survived. Oh, and there, this is Edith here. So this is the Gross and the Grossman families. Next. Yeah, okay, so that's Ida. That's her daughter, and that's her daughter, and that's her grandson. There's Bertha again, another picture with Bertha and Bergen-Belsen. And continue. And this is their family now. This is Lydia. She did the candles, the Shabbat candles. And that's Rena and Danka again. Okay, go ahead.
You can hate each other, but not to kill each other. I said so many nice words, you know, but tell me, who is listening to me? I wanted so much the world to listen.
There we go. So that is my Edith, and there's that's Jenna. She just had twins, and that's Danka Kornreich at the Museum of Jewish History. That's it. The rest of the slides we're not doing. So does anybody have any questions or comments? And then I do have a brief exercise that we could do. Yeah. Nobody has a reason to survive. Just about all of them would say luck. Yeah. And it's, you know, you can be smart, you can be, Lydia, who you just saw, who does this Shabbat candles, when I asked her why did you think her mother survived there were 12 cousins that all survived. One of the cousins was a Jewish capo. She ends up being a Jewish capo. So that's one of the reasons. But 4 of her cousins were executed. So, you know, she didn't help everybody. But Lydia absolutely, you know what she said? They were short. And I went, they were short? She goes, think about it. Her mother was 4'11". They're below the Nazi eye line. They don't take much food. Rena was a peasant, you know, like she was a farm girl. She didn't get super gaunt like other, you know, like city girls just aren't prepared. They drop like flies. Country girls who've been working in farms and stuff, they're more ready to do hard labor. So, you know, I think it has a lot to do with physiology. I would die in a minute. I would be a Muslim, you know, if you take food away from me, I'm like, I'm a stick. I'm not gonna survive. I know that. So I think physiology had a lot to do, but also being in the right place at the right time, you know, and as I said earlier, you know, Rena would say, why would God save me and not the girl next to me? I mean, there's some horrible, well, you know, you're all Holocaust educators. Rena has a Stibitz, SS Stibitz, he says calisthenics, and he makes all the girls lie in the mud during selections. And then he just walks around and steps on girls' heads and crushes their skulls. I mean, if you raise your head up, he will kill you. If you keep your head on the ground, he still might kill you, right? I mean, there's just no, you know, why will one person survive what's happening in Gaza and another not? Why will somebody survive in Ukraine and another not? War is a crapshoot. So it really did have a lot to do with luck. And you know, it's, and how do you not give up? And that's really top. You need your friends. So Joan Rosner, she was a native of Florida, and she survives from the first transport. She has a really interesting testimony. And one of the things I love about her testimony is she talks about how terrified she is of police. And she says if she sees a police officer, she has a panic attack. You know, it had never occurred to me, right? Of course, you know, but you wouldn't think that of that naturally. But Joan, you know, she talks about, she gets a fever. She gets, I think it's typhus. She gets fever and she's delirious. And she says to the girls in the block, my mother's outside. I have to go get my mother. And she walks outside, and of course you can get shot if you go outside, and she is literally heading for the wires because she's delirious. And the girls grab her and pull her back and hide her until she overcomes the fever. So that's, you know, you can't survive on your own, right? When I teach this stuff, and I know it's heavy stuff, I really do try to push the positive, and I give a shout out for that. Because if you only beat kids over the head with the horror, they're going to turn off. But if you give them something, you know, if you give them something inspirational to hang on to, like, I mean, I was really into reading about resistance, World War II resistance when I was young. I loved it. I wanted to work in the French resistance. It was like my dream job, right? I was 8. I thought, that'd be fun, right? Saving paratroopers. And I just, you know, that, it grabbed my imagination. You know, it pulled something into me in terms of justice. So I think it's so important. So the message, you know, of the film to me is sisterhood, is supporting each other. You know, how do we help each other? And the first time we showed this to a high school, it was a couple of high schools up in Pittsburgh, I sat up on a balcony. There, you know, there wasn't a spit wad in the house. The kids were absolutely taken in. And they really related to the story because they're teenagers, right? That's where we get them. And when we did a Q&A with the kids, you know, it's like one of the popular, you know, you could tell he's super in the back, he's super handsome. Everybody's like, you know, he's the cool dude, right? He stands up and he says, I can't imagine losing my family like that. It would devastate me. And immediately everybody wanted to have a conversation. So, you know, the sparking that imagination, building empathy is super important in what we teach. You know, and that's why I think this is a really powerful story, because they are teenagers. And if they have read Anne Frank, they only know beforehand. They don't know after. They don't have that. And here we do. What else? Yeah.
Please don't judge me. I'm an English teacher, so I come to these things so I can learn more about history. So I heard in several parts of the film and other discussions today, people talking about Russians coming to liberate the camps.
Oh yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing. I always thought it was the U.S.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, we love to take all the credit. Yeah.
Can you tell me just a little bit more?
Well, it was split down the middle. You can see in my map, which it happens in the book. It's clear. We have to, but yeah, you know, the Red Army is moving across, so they take over the east, and the west is I mean, the Brits freed Bergen-Belsen, not the Americans. Americans arrived later. Bertha's got that wrong. She's actually walking with British guys, but that's okay. But yeah, you know, it's basically Europe was split down the middle. And Rena talks a lot about that. That when they're at a camp called Neustadt Gleba, and it's split, and they're in no man's land. And if you go east, you're in the Russian zone, and if you go west, you're in the American zone. And she says to the girls that she's been liberated with, I think we should go to the American side. And so they walk, and then you don't have ID. You have no ID. You need to go back to Poland. And they literally, there was like 8 of them, fell on their knees sobbing. Please don't send us back. Please don't send us back. And this American major is standing there like going, oh my God, what do I do? And he lets them in. But nobody has ID. And then they all have to get jobs, right? I mean, there's no hospital, right? No. But that was really how it, the journeys home were Odysseus. Ulyssean. They were long. It took Edith weeks to get home. Yeah, and nobody she says she does get back, and her parents are there because her father was a glazer and had done airplane. He was protected for a long time till they had to hide. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Russian side, Edith would argue that. I mean, she went to the Russian side and, ended up full education and, but they were in Czech and Slovakia till the 60s, and they left right before the things shut down. But yeah, it was challenging, and I mean, one of the reasons people did stay was because of language. If they didn't have any other language skills, it's scary to go to another country. It's scary to be a refugee or an expat. It's really, really terrifying. And a lot of people just wanted to find out if their parents had survived, right? Yeah. It was really, that's interesting. So I have a couple of survivors, one who stops to ask for water, and somebody says, we're coming back. She says, we're coming back from the camps. And she said, more of you are coming back than left. And she's like, oh, great, I'm in Slovakia, right? And there is a survivor of the first transport. Her name is Gizzy Grumarova. She's in one of the last photos. She was friends with Irina Fine. And Gizzy is murdered by some Ukrainian fascists. Ukraine wasn't perfect, and they, that's a pretty horrendous story. So yeah, I mean, it certainly was there, and it still is. One of the reasons I'm heading to Slovakia right now for the premiere, they are very on the verge of losing all their funding. The Museum of Jewish Culture in Bratislava could lose its funding, and because the government is Putin savvy and Putin, supporters, as we are seeing in Hungary as well. So they're very nervous, and we're going to make waves. That's what we do. I hope. Any other questions? I'm going to give you a quick exercise, because this is one that I used to use in my classes, and when I taught Rena's Promise. And it was a really good way to get kids to sort of, it gave them a good writing exercise at the end of it. And so what I would say, did anybody online have any questions? I don't know if has anybody had any questions there. No.
We had a
right,
question about what the process was like for sifting through the archives and identifying individuals' photos.
I couldn't hear that.
So,
It's, you know, it's really exciting, sad. You know, you're like on a treasure hunt. When you find something, you get like really excited about it. And then, you know, sometimes I just break down because of what I have found. So it's a big, you know, it's very rewarding even when I'm breaking down, you know, and I just always try to keep in mind that this isn't about me. None of this has to do with me. I'm just being of service. I'm just trying to do something where nothing was done and get my ego out of the way, which is tough because I have a really good ego. Yeah, that would be, that's a great question though. I mean, I love archival search, you know, it's like, you know, it's like a mystery. I love a good mystery, you know. I love solving a mystery before at the end, last page. And so it sort of suits my personality. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good question. All right, so.
We have one more question online that says, I'm not sure if you're able to hear me. What story resonated with you the most, either in the movie or outside of the movie?
What story, what?
Resonated with you the most.
Yeah, that's an impossible question. You know, each of these stories I feel so deeply. There's a story in the book that we couldn't put in the film that about the Hartman sisters or cousins and the postcards that go back and forth between Auschwitz and the family, and I love that story. I know the family, and it's an incredible. One of the postcards comes from the parents into Auschwitz, so the cousin is working for Gestapo, so she can write back and forth. And she never, ever tells her story, ever. She never talks about it. It must be a horrible job, right? She's working for the Gestapo. She's protected. And a card comes in, Hauer Magduska and Olga. They actually call her Nutsi. Did they get the money and the food we sent them? Tell them to write. Why haven't they written? And you realize reading this card that they think they're in a commissary and they see each other all the time. And it's sort of chiding, you know, like, why haven't you written? You're at school, right? And they're dead. They're dead. And that is that very smoky girl when we have the wall of names, and she's looking straight at us, and she's dark-haired, beautiful, beautiful young woman, and her mother was disabled. And so when she went to the transport, she said, see you later. They knew that they wouldn't take her because she was her mother's caregiver. Her mother had epilepsy and was in a wheelchair. And she was a farm girl. She worked a farm and cared for her mother. And they took her on the transport. So she never got to say goodbye to her family. And the family escapes. The mother actually ends up in a hospital, and they don't realize she's a Jew. She survives the Holocaust. Dies later because she's so ill, but you know, it's that devastating sense of the family not knowing what's going on, and it's those stories of innocence that really strike a chord for me. The naivete, nobody knew what was happening, and yeah, thanks. All right, we go to my exercise, because this is a quick one, and maybe you can do it. I don't think it's DEI or I don't think it's going to get you in trouble. Might, I don't know. It's Florida. It's America. So what I say is down the hallway, there is a dictator, and he is taking over all the classrooms. And we are a small classroom here. And we know he's coming this way because as he comes down the hall, he takes over each classroom. The first thing he does when he comes into the classroom and takes it over is he makes everybody with green eyes stand up because he really doesn't like people with green eyes, can't stand them. So everybody with green eyes, please stand up. Oh my God, look at those people. Did you know that about these people? They have green eyes. Okay, and then I sort of look at the room and I go, okay, is this enough people or do I need more? So if it's an Irish class, I know this is plenty, but if it's not an Irish class. So now, he really doesn't like people with green eyes. So everybody who's got an aunt or uncle or a cousin or a brother or sister with green eyes, you have to stand up to. Oh, man. Look at that. Okay. So then I tell the story of the King of Denmark, which of course has been sort of debunked at this point, but it works for the purposes of the story, which is that the King of Denmark had the Jews put on the gold star. I'm sorry, that the regular, everybody in the country put on their gold stars so that they couldn't single people out. They couldn't, right? If you stand in solidarity with your neighbor, right, it's harder to find. If everybody stands up, it's going to be much harder for me to see if you have green eyes, right? So I say, okay, I'm going to ask that question again. And you have exactly 10 seconds to make a decision. Are you going to stand up or not? He's coming in the classroom. He says, everybody with green eyes, stand up. What are you going to do? You have to, it's an action. You have to take an action. You have to take an action. No, it's a stand-up question. You can't sit down because, yeah. So this is, now look around the room. Who's standing up? Who isn't? And if you can't stand up, that's fine. Okay, you could raise your hand if you can't stand up. Okay. But let's pretend that you didn't stand up, because I've done this before and somebody hasn't stood up, right? And we look around the room. So this is where the writing exercise comes in. Why did you make the decision you made? And that's why did you stand up or didn't? Why didn't you stand up? And what did you learn from this exercise? So you can sit back down. And I think there was another question, but I had the most amazing responses from students. One young woman was really upset that I didn't give them more time to make up her mind because she didn't understand what was going on. Great conversation. Do things slow down when you have to make a quick decision? No, right? You have to be aware. If you have a moral and ethical bone and you know who you are, then you know to act. You know how you would act. But you have to jump, right? You have to take an action. Then I had a young man who was, he was huge. And he was on trial for a hate crime. In my town, he had beaten up a Latino guy with his thugs, friends. And what did he write about? He wrote about why he was afraid to stand up because his sister had green eyes. And he had never, ever been singled out before. He ended up going to prison, but he went to prison with that essay in his mind. And then I had somebody, then if you don't stand up, why didn't you stand up? Because I didn't think it was any of my business. I didn't care. Or I stood up because my neighbor stood up. Right? So you really get to write it truthfully. It's not, and I make sure they understand, I'm not judging you. I just want you to look at your thought process. I want you to, why did I make that decision? Where was I going? What did I think about? And why did I make that decision the way I did? And it just, for me, that's why this work is so important. Because if we can't take it into the community, history repeats itself. We know that. That's why we teach history. And how do we change? How do we change how we go into the community? Do we see each other? We have way more in common than we have differences, right? We all come from, this is probably a controversial thing to say, but I believe that we all come from Lucy, you know, and the same place. And we all have DNA that we share. And we all have common experiences that we share, right? You know, my cab driver last night, he lived in Maui. I was like, oh my God, I love Maui. I have a really good friend. Like, how would I know that unless I spoke to him? And I, you know, I'd never look at him and think, oh, like that guy lived in Maui, right? I would never think that. So it's those stereotypes, those things that keep us apart, that separate us. And, you know, and we are seeing that so much today. The other thing I can just say is, you know, for me, having courage to take on these issues and to discuss them honestly is really important. And I know that a lot of people have your hands are tied as with curriculum issues. But I'm here to make the world a better place. And I know you are too. Yeah, thank you.
Stretch your legs, use the facilities, and we'll try and come back. Actually, let's do till 2:15.
Do you want me to sign a book?
Yeah, if you, yes. Here, actually, I'll have to get the copies of the books. Actually, if she wants, I'll bring the books in.
Yeah.
Kayla, if you could come up and bring some of the 999 books. Kayla, bring the books up, the 999 if you can.